The third question of this evening comes from Greg Tuttle. He says this: Jesus ascended into heaven when he died on the cross. He told the robber they would. He said, "My question is, do we know anything about the time he had um, in heaven before he appeared after his resurrection?" So, so we all understand the Bible does not clearly tell us what happened to Jesus from when he died to when he resurrected. Now, there's some things we call inference. What Ephesians tells us is that when Jesus rose from the dead, it says that he delivered the captivities captive. He took them basically before God and he presented them as a first fruit offerings. So who's he talking about? There's an Old Testament concept called Sheol, that the place of the dead. It was also in the New Testament is what we call Abraham's bosom, which is where the dead went when they died, up until Jesus Christ died on the cross. And it speaks of Jesus actually going to these spirits in prison and preaching the gospel to him. And so the best indication that we have is that when he was talking on the thief of the cross about today you will be with me in paradise, was that when the thief was upon the cross and Jesus was dying, that Jesus actually went to Sheol, which Luke tells us that that was the same place that you had two guys. There's a story in there. It's not a story. It's a real happening, I think, which is Lazarus is a beggar and the rich man. The rich man was in Sheol. He was in a place of torment, but he could still see Lazarus. And so when he saw Lazarus, he asked Lazarus to come over this great gulf fixed between them and just put a drop of water on his tongue. And so he then pleads with Lazarus to have him uh, at least tell his brothers and sisters. So it seems to indicate this, because it says that Jesus went into captivity and he preached to the spirits in prison, and then he led them up before God. That actually what in between happens is that from when Jesus died until when right before probably he was resurrected and everyone saw him, that he went to Sheol, the Old Testament abode of the dead, and he preached the truth to them, and he spoke to even those who were in prison and were against him so they would know what they had rejected in their life. And then he took all those who were in paradise and he ascended to the Father. We know some of this had to have been true because when you look in Matthew, it actually says that some of the spirits or some of the people who had died, Old Testament saints even, had come out of their grave and presented witnesses in that inner period. And so we're not entirely sure all the exact time, but I can say it seems that Jesus, before he ascended to heaven, actually went to Sheol, spent a little bit of time there preaching to the spirits in prison, taking the spirits of captivity, and he brought them up. And on his way, I think he stopped by earth, because you remember when Mary came to him and she clung to Jesus, and Jesus says, he says, wait for right now, don't cling to me because I haven't ascended to my Father and your Father. So there's this idea that he had not gone to heaven just yet. He had been resurrected, but he wasn't there yet. And so I think what happened was he went down there, took those spirits out of the prison, preached the gospel so they'd understand what they had said yes to, and then he brought them up, and on his way, some of them were resurrected, and he brought some of those to the Father before everyone else saw him. All right, so I hope that answers your question, Greg.